Good morning, and welcome to the First Parish in Framingham. Welcome if this is your first time joining us, and welcome back if this is your community. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you move around in the world, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. We welcome you here in the meeting house, on Zoom, or wherever and whenever you may be watching the service in the future. I am Rupal Bhatt. I use she, her pronouns, and I am your worship associate this morning. Please be sure to read the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following the worship service, you're invited to join us for coffee hour in Scott Hall, just across this courtyard. And additionally, during coffee hour, there is a baked potato potluck, and also an opportunity to chat with our guest minister over dessert. And today, our guest preacher today is the Reverend Mary Margaret Earle. Reverend Mary Margaret has been the executive director and the senior minister of the UU Urban Ministries for the last 9 years. This is also our 4th week of 5 Sunday services. It's an experiment with family worship and our worship service. So our family worship took place today at 10 a.m. Please take a moment now to turn your phones or other devices to their quietest settings. While beeps and buzzes can be distracting, we welcome your human noises. We especially love the sound of your singing, so please join in. Since 1701, people have gathered as this community to rest or recharge, to be challenged or affirmed, and those people are like you. You belong here, maybe only for the next hour, but we hope for longer. We are happy to have you with us. I now invite you to take a comfortable breath in and out. Continue to take a few more comfortable breaths and begin to release whatever you need to let go of, to be more fully present to yourself, one another, and the sacred in this time and place.
The Swan by Mary Oliver. Did you too see it drifting all night on the Black River? Did you see it in the morning rising into the silvery air, an armful of white blossoms, a perfect commotion of silk and linen as it leaned into the bondage of its wings? A snowbank, a bank of lilies biting the air with its black beak. Did you hear it fluting and whistling a shrill dark music, like the rain pelting the trees, like a waterfall knifing down the black ledges? And did you see it finally, just under the clouds, a white cross streaming across the sky, its feet like black leaves, its wings like the stretching light of the river? And did you feel it in your heart, how it pertained to everything? And have you too finally figured out what beauty is for? And have you changed your life? We light this chalice this morning, remembering beauty. Please stand and join with me in our opening hymn, number 188, Come, Come, Whoever You Are. Please join in our sung and spoken affirmation, the words of which are printed in your order of service.
Allison and I, we clearly have to work on our nonverbal communication. We set aside this time in our gathering to share with one another the joys and concerns which are now shaping our lives. After our final candle is lit, we will sing the 2 verses of There is a Love, and it's in your order of service. I'm going to begin with the sorrows of our gathered community. This is from Kevin Stern. My friend's dad had a stroke on Monday. He is recovering, but the road is a long one. And these are the joys of our gathered community. Karen Greenberger, happy the sun was out for some time over the weekend. Yes. The Climate Action Team, thanks to Larry Decker for organizing our booth at Framingham's Earth Day yesterday. And Carol Boys, and for the great weather also. And the next one is from me. The Bott Park family, we finally moved back to our home after 7 months of renovation. All right.
I invite us again to take a deep breath in, to close our eyes, to settle into our seat. Let our shoulders drop, and for a moment, remember that there is no other place that we need to be right now. And there is no other thing that we need to be doing right now but being here in community and in peace. Loving and sacred presence, we gather in gratitude for this place and for one another. We lift up gratitude for the life in our bodies that enabled us to gather ourselves and come in through these doors and be here. We lift up gratitude for a faith community where we find hope and support and possibility. And we lift up to all those worries and struggles and pain that we hold quietly in our hearts. And we lift up a prayer that the creative spirit of the universe will help us find solutions and take the next step forward. As we enter into this time of peace and quiet, we breathe in and enter into a time of silence. Amen.
Good morning. Julie Porter and I, Lauren Falwell, are your current UU Urban Ministry delegates. Today's Share the Plate goes to this valuable organization, which First Parish has supported for many years. The UU Urban Ministry is a social justice organization based in the Roxbury neighborhood of Boston, with its offices at the historic First Church in Roxbury. This church is currently at the end stages of its renovation. Last year, many of you generously contributed to their Pews project in support of this remarkable project. Thank you. Julie and I are planning to organize a group from First Parish to visit the UU Urban Ministry sometime this spring when we could see the amazing renovated church and experience one of the special tours of the Roxbury neighborhood that are sponsored by the UU Urban Ministry. Keep a watch in the Faithful Dispatch for more on this opportunity in the coming weeks.
Today we are fortunate to have Reverend Mary Margaret Earle, the Executive Director and Senior Minister of the UU Urban Ministry, here to talk with us about the amazing work that she and her team and many volunteers are doing to advance racial, social, and economic justice in Boston. We're so proud that First Parish voted in the 8th principle last year, and the UU Urban Ministry is a great partner for us to work together with to demonstrate our commitment to racial justice and all forms of oppression in our community. We appreciate your donations today for Share the Plate. We're a supporting congregation of the UU Urban Ministry, and so the dues for that are included in today's collection. If you write a check, please write it out to First Parish in Framingham and put on the memo line UUUM. And thank you for your support. This morning's offerings will now be gratefully received.
Our reading is from the book Wild by Cheryl Strayed. Cheryl Strayed hiked 1,110 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail in a pilgrimage to heal her life's hurts, most especially the quick death of her 45-year-old mother to cancer when Cheryl was 21. She went ill-prepared and too heavily loaded and quickly felt the pain of that. 2 small boots wrecking her feet, a too heavy pack, leaving her hips bleeding and raw and her back bent, and still she walked. She claimed a cast-off ski pole to steady her. She lightened her load, shedding what was not essential. Her legs grew stronger, but still it never got easy, not even to the end. She wrote of the second week of the journey, quote, "It was day 1 of week 2, officially summer, the last week of June, and I was not only in a different season now, but in a different country too, ascending higher in the South Sierra Wilderness. In the 40 miles between Kennedy Meadows and Trail Pass, I'd climb from an elevation of just over 6,100 feet to nearly 11,000. Even in the heat of the first afternoon back on the trail, I could feel an edge of cool in the air that would no doubt envelop me at night. There was no question that I was in the Sierra now, Muir's beloved range of light. I walked beneath great dark trees that put the smaller plants beneath in almost complete shadow, and past wide grassy meadows of wildflowers. I scrambled over snowmelt streams by stepping from one unsteady rock to another, aided by my ski pole. At foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed just barely surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought of how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there." So ends our reading. Please stand and join with me in singing hymn number 168, One More Step. So it is lovely to be back in Framingham. I'm trying to remember the last time I came, and it seems like it's been a little while. It's nice because I come to share with you updates about the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, of which Framingham is a member. But it's also nice because I can appreciate the ways that through time you've been knitted into the work of the urban ministry. I want to appreciate our delegates, who are the people who share information back and forth, Lauren Falwell and Julie Porter, and appreciate people who've been supporters of our work through time, Joyce and Roger McNeil, Valerie and Ed Waldman, Julia Porter, John Griffith, Lawrence Decker, Nancy Lapel, and I especially want to lift up somebody who I'm sure is dear to many of you, who passed away recently, Myrna Howe, who was a beloved and wonderful friend of the urban ministry. When I think about Myrna, one of the things that I remember about her was a number of years ago, pre-COVID, we had a holiday event in the meeting house, which you heard we're restoring, and it was sort of when it was really dark and cold, and you know that it's hard to drive into Boston on the best of days. And Myrna, she was just determined to participate in our holiday gathering. And she drove from Framingham, drove herself in, I think drove a friend. And I just remember she got a little lost, but she persevered and she showed up. And I just remember her coming through sort of halfway through, being just Myrna, and bringing the joy that she brought every time she came to the urban ministry, and just her commitment to being part of our work. And so it feels very special to me to be here and celebrate and honor Myrna, who was a very dear friend of the urban ministry. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for nurturing a community that has friends like Myrna in it. So this morning, as we begin to deepen our worship together, I want to begin with a question for you. And the question is, how is your heart? I mean, how are you? And how is your heart in the midst of everything, in the midst of the hard news and the bad news and all the challenges, in the midst of hearing about climate change and political tensions and all of it? How is your heart? The heart that is called, has always been called to respond to a world that is in need of love and justice. How is your heart? So I lift that up as we deepen our time together. And I begin with a trip last summer when I passed through Auburn, New York, which is a stone's throw from my hometown in upstate. In the stunning quiet and shimmer of the Finger Lakes near Lake Cayuga's shores, I spotted a sign on Route 34 for the Harriet Tubman House. Intrigued, I stopped in. Of course, I knew Harriet Tubman, called the Moses of her people, the woman who claimed her freedom from enslavement and led others through the dark by the light of the North Star to freedom too. I remembered her image from children's books, but not much else, and certainly not that she had once lived so near my childhood places. Harriet, born Araminta Ross on the eastern shore of the slave state of Maryland, had deep ties in Boston. She visited this region many times, building a network of support and friendship that sustained her efforts to lead others to freedom. And she retired to Auburn on land from her friend William Seward, who is Lincoln's Secretary of State and an Auburn son. The AME Zion Church bought her home and is restoring it as a landmark. And the day I visited, an AME pastor led a tour of the property, sharing the contours of Tubman's life 110 years after she had died there. A half hour of stories inspired me to learn more, and so I read 2 biographies and Googled details endlessly. The details of her life made the madness of enslavement more vivid and real. Stories like how she was rented out as a 5-year-old child to tend to a white newborn on another plantation, and was beaten if the baby awakened and cried in the night. How, as a small child, she sneaked a sugar cube and had to hide in a pig pen for days to avoid the violence that was awaiting her as punishment. Of the brain injury she suffered when an enslaver hurled a metal weight at another enslaved person and struck her in the head, Some have theorized that the vision she had of God calling her to her daring work resulted from that injury. And how Harriet, as she renamed herself, rose out of this insane system and claimed her freedom, left her family, a beloved husband, all she knew to arrive in Philadelphia. She walked a long way to the city of freedom. And yet more than that, what grabs hold is this: how Harriet, 5 feet tall, unable to read or write, with few resources, by grit and will and savvy, risked recapture and re-enslavement and death again and again in order to lead others to freedom. By foot and by night, she made this dangerous, cold, terrifying journey again and again and again. The way was long, but Harriet Tubman walked it about 15 times and led more than 70 others to freedom too. In the book Harriet Tubman, The Road to Freedom, author Catherine Clinton wrote this, quote, "Harriet Tubman had been a liberator, a woman who stood up to the slave power, and a warrior whose actions spoke louder than words. She seized the road to freedom, not just for herself, but also for her family and others during her decade-long association with the Underground Railroad. This bravery earned her a fierce reputation. She was on the slaveholders' most wanted list with a steep price on her head. Posters with a description of Moses, as she was called, were plastered through the Upper South until the Civil War broke out," end quote. Harriet Tubman's personal courage and stamina captivates, not only because of her unusual courage before the war, or even her work to end enslavement as a spy for the North during the war, but that her work never ended. After the war, she worked until her death in Auburn to care and advocate for African Americans who were aging in poverty. She never stopped confronting racial oppression. The way was long, and she kept to it. The way is still long, and we are called to keep to it. Nearly 160 years after the Civil War ended, Greater Boston remains mired in the legacy of enslavement and racism and segregation. Graduation rates, incarceration rates, wealth and health measures remain shaped by them. Consider infant mortality. This past fall, the Boston Public Health Commission published the Maternal and Infant Health Report. In Boston, Black residents experience the highest rates of infant mortality, preterm births, and low birth weight. The rate of infant mortality among Black infants in Boston was more than 3 times the rate for white infants. Consider housing. According to the Boston Indicators Project, 66% of Black residents are renter, double the rate of white residents. That means that Black residents are more likely vulnerable to spiraling rent increases and then displacement, and cannot build the wealth that is earned through home ownership. Consider the racial wealth gap itself. According to the Indicators Project, racial wealth disparities have grown and not lessened in the past 30 years. Quote, "In the United States, economic inequity is inextricably connected to growing racial inequity. By 2019, white wealth was almost 9 times as high as Black wealth." And then consider death. The mortality gap remains a stark reminder of racism, with a 23-year difference in life expectancy between Roxbury residents and those in White Back Bay just 1 mile away. Racism's stamp marks the lives of African Americans from birth through death and at every point in between. It is these realities that drive the UU Urban Ministry's mission to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture and to envision a greater Boston where all its residents can shape the present and the future. And so we continue to operate programs like our longtime domestic violence shelter and also reimagine our work for justice. We're expanding our after-school program to nurture the next generation of BIPOC leaders and creating career exploration opportunities so that young people can choose their own paths forward. We created our community conversations series to highlight the history and impact of racism, this year focusing on housing. We've expanded our Roxbury Tours program, celebrating its richness and history. And we're nearing completion of the full restoration of our historic meeting house as a place to serve and celebrate Roxbury. Unitarian Universalists from our 46 member congregations like Framingham have helped us in every single one of these changes, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished together. And there is so much work to do. Families in our neighborhood in Roxbury are getting pushed out by gentrification daily. Young people cannot get the opportunities they need. Brilliant young people who flourished in our after-school program, went to college, graduated, still can't find the jobs that they want. The way is long. From our reading by Cheryl Strayed, quote, "At foot speed, the Sierra Nevada seemed just barely surmountable. I could always take another step. It was only when I rounded a bend and glimpsed the white peaks ahead that I doubted my abilities. Only when I thought of how far I had yet to go that I lost faith that I would get there." What we need is just to take another step, and then another, and then another. In our work at the UU Urban Ministry and in the work that we all do for justice individually, collectively, we need to just take another step. We need to keep walking forward even when it's daunting and steep and hard. And so I return to this question: how are you? How is your heart? What do you need to keep pressing forward on the long way to justice? This morning, I'm going to invite you to honor what you need to keep on your path to justice in whatever way you feel called, to fight against climate change, for trans rights, to bring music to everyone, to shelter immigrants, or to work for racial justice. Sometimes on our path, we need community. Harriet Tubman needed it. She was sometimes alone in her underground rescues, but she was also encouraged and sustained by a web of like-minded abolitionists. In them, she found encouragement and support. The Underground Railroad was possible only because people committed to change worked together to form an unbroken line from enslavement to freedom. Sometimes we need to be part of a group that is working together in common goals to encourage one another forward. Sometimes we need community. Sometimes we need silence and to nurture our inner spiritual lives, to put down our cell phones and the pinging and the buzz and the dizzying array of headlines and breathe and connect with that which is bigger than we are. Sometimes we need to nurture the spiritual. Sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. What we offer right now, at this point in our lives, our gifts, our talents, are fully sufficient for the call. Harriet couldn't read or write. She had few material resources, but she was smart and cunning and had charisma. She used her gifts. What gifts do we bring to the change that we seek? artist, activist, builder, speaker, organizer, dancer, listener, sometimes we need to remember that we are enough. And so I'm going to invite you this morning into a communion for the activist heart. I'm going to invite you to breathe in and think about what you need for the next step. Community, spirit, grounded in the knowledge that you're enough. And I am going to invite you to select an item from one of 3 baskets that represent what you need to keep going. And I'm going to invite our basket holders to come forward. Thank you. The opposite. All right. So, science tells us that trees communicate beneath the surface. They form a community. So if what you need on your next step forward is community, I invite you to come forward and take a piece of the bark of a tree. We didn't pull it off the tree, it fell on the ground. We didn't harm, no trees were harmed in the making of this bark. So if you need community for your next step, come forward and you could take a piece of the bark of the tree. If what you need is to nurture the spiritual part of your life, to get in touch with what's bigger than we are, I invite you to come forward and take a candle representing nurturing your spiritual life. And if what you need is to remember that you are enough, I invite you to come forward and take a stone that reminds you to be grounded in that knowledge. I'm going to invite you to come forward through the center aisle and then to return to your seats, circling around this way. And if you are unable to come forward, raise your hand. My colleague Annie Stubbs from the Urban Ministry will bring around a small basket that allows you to select an item from your seat. Come, whoever you are, come and honor what it is that you need on this next step. The way is long, and we must keep going even when it's muddy and steep and rock-strewn, and even when it's hard. The way is long, and we must keep going because the world needs us to. Change takes time and faithfulness. At foot speed, we can always take another step, and may it be so. Please join with me in singing our final hymn, This Little Light of Mine. Go out remembering that you have gifts to bring to a world that needs them, and go out remembering that the world has gifts to give you to nurture you along the way. Go in peace and hope.